Many of you have been on this lean journey with us for many, many years, as you saw from the introductions. And I know some of you have felt at different time that this effort starts to plateau. I would like to dedicate this year's presentation to talk about some ideas, and many of those really we have talked before, but we never put them together in one comprehensive presentation to really drive this journey so that you keep moving, keep the excitement, and keep the results and growth going for years to come. There is a growing disenchantment. General Electric has been on this journey for more than 20 years, first with Lean and later on with Six Sigma. But it's very interesting that 2010 report that talks about growth, which should be the driving point for Lean and Lean Sigma, there's hardly any mention of Lean, and surprisingly, Six Sigma is missing completely from this report. And also, I spent quite a bit of time last year talking to many of you, talking to press, talking to some of my colleagues about the troubles at Toyota. I believed it then, and I believe it now very strongly, that troubles at Toyota were not because of Lean philosophy. Toyota got into trouble because the Toyota leadership for last 5, 6, 7 years stopped believing in the Lean philosophy and got in trouble because, as you all know, if you are true to this philosophy, they could have not gotten into this trouble. Yet, the press has a field day trying to pin the blame, all the blame on Lean. And even things like natural disaster this year in Japan got misplaced blame for Lean, and it continues. Everyone is questioning because it creates sensation, because something that is popular, shoot at it, and you create sensation. So, is Lean just another fad? We don't think so. And I hope you believe what I'm saying, because if you look at and talk to many, many people, and this is based on our survey that we do, and we've been doing it for many years, this year supplemented by McGladrey's survey, more and more people are doing or increasing the emphasis on Lean or the tenets of Lean, but their expectations have also grown, and they want to see visible results for the key initiatives rather than just do window dressing. And this seems to be quite prevalent. I was talking to Ron, and I were talking to one of the key hospitals administrator a couple of days ago. And I know this hospital very well, and I know many people, operating people, who have asked me several times to somehow get to the top and try to implement some of the ideas. But yet, the person on the top thought that, oh, they are as good as they could be. They have all types of Six Sigma programs going on for a long time, and yet, if you go to the hospital, which I have done, walk the process, you find absolutely no evidence. Yes, there are some spotted signs of 5S and some posters that talk about Six Sigma, but the results are missing, and that's what happens in many cases. It becomes activity rather than result focus. So the biggest fallacy that we have found when we do our customer feedback and discussions based on our customers' perception is that the Lean transformation is very narrowly focused on cost reduction, and even then, narrowly focused on manufacturing only. And if you do that, what is going to happen that in 2 to 3 years, the excitement wanes and you plateau. And then the other problem that comes in is that people start focusing on activity. I see so many people. I visited a company that Doug is familiar with in Netherlands, and they said, well, before we talk about possible involvement of TBM in our operation, let's tell you what we have been doing. And I said, okay. So they listed, first of all, 191 Kaizen events that we've done over last 3 years. They listed some of the results. We cleaned this area up, we painted the machines, we did all this. And then the last part was, I said, results. What are the results? Oh, we didn't get any. And when that happens, you know the whole journey is going to falter, or at best, people will say, we've been there, done that, it doesn't work for us. Yet, it is interesting that if you look at various studies that have been done by some of the leading organizations, you find today lean, operational excellence, or however you want to define it, is more important than ever. IBM study with CEOs' perspective on dealing with complexity. They're talking about building operational dexterity or flexibility to able to respond very quickly to customers' requirements. They're talking about leadership that is focused on tapping into the creativity of the entire workforce. And they're talking about reinventing customer relationships. And as you know, these things are the very hallmarks of the journey that you've been on. And yet, these are some things people are saying today that this is where they need to focus. McKinsey & Company study on preparing for growth. They talk about doing more with less, improving productivity, trying to not just focus on growth of labor, doing more with more, but doing more with less is the key, and they'll even talk about lean. Best practices like lean need to be implemented. And finally, focus on innovation. And as you have heard us talk many, many years, the best way to focus on innovation is what we call value innovation, getting close to your customers, capturing the voice of customers, trying to find out what is bothering them, what is not being met, and what is causing them difficulty, and you can actually buy long-lasting customer loyalty. BCG study with CEOs on the need for innovation. They're talking about risk-averse culture. As you know, one of the very first thing that we used to talk about 10, 15, 20 years ago was ready, fire, aim. You need to get people out of the mindset of paralysis to analysis. They need to get more focused on trying things, doing things, taking risks. And if you do that at the speed of Kaizen, even if you fail, you learn a lot. And that's the culture that always helps bring out the 14-year-old mentality in us, and we become creative again. The no barriers on our head are taken away. Product lead time, as you know, and many of you have been involved, by using these principles of lean, you can cut the product development times by 2/3. And of course, the old adage by Taiichi Ohno, if you can't measure, you can't improve. It's just showing in a different format. The interesting thing is, if you look at these 3 studies done by 3 different companies from the CEOs of the largest companies around the globe, they're all talking about refocusing on the tenets of lean. improving responsiveness to your customers for everything they need, whether it is product, whether it is service, whether it is responsiveness to their difficulties when you have issues with quality. It's reliability in terms of your quality of your products, reliability in terms of your delivery, reliability in terms of everything that you do. It is doing more with less. Higher productivity, so you have more cash freed up, less cash tied up in inventory, so you have capital and fuel for growth, whether it comes through organic means or it comes through inorganic means. So all of these things are pointing towards that. Recently, Angela and I attended a conference by Kennedy Advisory Services. Kennedy works with all the consulting firms in the U.S. as well as around the globe. And it's very interesting when they ask company CEOs who hire consultants. It is amazing to see. Of course, 2009 was an anomaly, but always the more focus has been on cost reduction and less focus on growth in seeking out advice. This is the first year in many years where growth focus has exceeded the cost reduction focus. Because, as they said, you can't cost cut your way to prosperity or to growth. Customer intimacy, very, very important. Culture change. We have to get people, hearts and minds into it, and be open to new business models, to look at out of the box, what works based on changing requirements and changing demographics of our customers. So here is our recipe to overcome the plateau. First and foremost, you have to make lean as integral part of your growth strategy, in which you get very close to your customers, learn and decipher the voice of customer, and delight them with extreme responsiveness in terms of your products, your services, and service or customer service in general. And then you have to do that with very little investment, whether it is in manpower, whether it is in materials, whether it is in investments, and you have to have measurement system that is fully aligned toward this and focus on cash flow, not necessarily for the sake of cash flow, but for the sake of getting rid of something that makes you lethargic. That's the inventory. And inventory could be in terms of materials. It could be also in terms of thoughts and processes that take a long time to become actions. And the last part, and very important part, is that it is no secret that when you ask majority of the people, they will tell you that they're using only a small portion of their ability and their creativity at work. There is a lot more to be tapped in, and the only way you can do that if we appeal to the hearts and minds of the people, if we give them an opportunity to buy in. Because when we do that, as you've seen, many of you have seen, the results are amazing. Same number of people can produce twice as much output, 4 times as much profitability, and be very, very proud of it. We have a shining example of 18-year transformation at Pella, but on top of it, for the last 6 or 7 years, Pella by their employees have been named as the most desirable place to work. So, opposite of what some people will let you believe, that by doing more with less, people will be unhappy. This is an example, and I'm sure there are many other examples like this. So, more systematically, a model that we want to recommend to you is look at these 3 stages and make sure that you have a momentum, which only comes from leadership's awareness and leadership's forward-thinking vision to transition evenly from tool-driven stage, which could last a year, into system where you're trying to take, and I'll take these in more detail, trying to take this more system-wise and finally make it so it becomes way of life, the principle-driven, which the rate of growth, rate of change will grow almost exponentially. So you look at the first phase, it is the easiest part and is exciting, but the focus most of the time is on a function, and in many cases a function could be manufacturing, it could be one functional area in terms of service industries, and people are very much driven by the tools. They measure activity, they measure the tools and what we are implementing, and I remember 10 years ago in many companies we got in the constant, totally non-value adding discussions about, gee, is this lean or is it Six Sigma, is this or what? Who cares? At the end of the day, it has to be something that is helping you achieve the overall objective. But in this phase, the culture is not yet grounded because you created a little bit of excitement, and many times you find at the end of that, people say, okay, we've been there, done that, and you stop the process, or it becomes one of those program of the quarter, program of the month. The second phase, now you start spreading through other functions, like engineering, like R&D, like marketing, like finance, and so on. And you involve, on a selected basis, your supply chain partners, your demand chain partners, and the improvements become much more visible because you are past the old accounting system now that you transcended from one year to the second year, and you can start seeing cash flow benefits, you start seeing income benefits, and you start extending across the value chain. And culture starts spreading. But again, if it is not nurtured, if you're not challenged constantly, it can fall back again. The final stage is where it becomes a business-wide philosophy with intense focus on customers, and primarily to really learn how to delight them more, how to delight them constantly, capturing the voice of customer, learning from that the valuable nuggets that will help you uncover those small differentiators that will make you more dear and more loyal, or your customer will become more loyal. And in this stage, the focus becomes almost end-to-end across the value chain. And you have to develop a very comprehensive business management system that measures constantly, that helps you get the philosophy of digging for root cause, implementing countermeasures, and getting back on track, because no matter how well you plan, things will not go. And by this time, hopefully, the culture is embedded and you can't kill it even if you want to. Again, using the example of Pella, we are the 4th CEO now, Dan? 4th CEO since 1993 when we started this journey. And there is no question of letting down. And the other very important thing I find, and I was in Europe reviewing one of the multi-division, multi-factory company, and as this company was talking about their philosophy and their measurement or their status of lean, it was very interesting after this presentation, you reflect back and say, gee, it's interesting that everyone who is just starting or has not started on the journey already think they're doing great. And those who've been on this journey for 5, 6 years and doing great say, boy, we got a long way to go. That's when you know it's embedded and it's not going to, because it becomes a journey without a destination. And forever you get the benefit of that. The other part is results. Because if you don't have results, you're not going to have sustainment. You're not going to convince people to constantly do hard work, constantly sacrifice, and excel. The first set of results come in terms of cash. It starts very quickly. If you focus extensively, you will find that a lot of cash is released first year, and it explodes as you go into more deeper involvement. The second one is net income. You will see the net income will grow, and if it's not growing, you know there's something wrong. We are not leveraging our lean journey the right way. And of course, the last part is revenue and growth. If that's not coming, then you're not going to be able to excite people, because people are looking for security. If you can do more with less, and the result of that is that you lay people off, that probably will be the very short-lived program. So all this growth accelerates and keeps going. Now, we've seen companies doing this for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, close to 20 years, and still there's no end in sight. So you have to really ask, is your journey throwing out the measurable top line and bottom line results? And if not, why not? Because otherwise you will not be able to sustain it. It will plateau, if not now, in the near future. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the culture. This was heard at one of the launches of the Lean Journey. So how, when you hear this, and it's very interesting, about 10, 15 years ago, we were working at Chrysler. And before starting to work with Chrysler, the management came to us and said, we want to do this stuff, this lean stuff, but you have to cleanse your whole material, take out all the mention of Kaizen and Toyota and lean and everything, and we came up with some convoluted things. So, that time we were small, Chrysler was big, so we complied with some of those changes. And very first training, I was conducting very first training, on the Kaizen. And some people from the union said, well, what about that stuff that Toyota is doing? Why can't we do that? So it just makes you wonder, how management and the unions were disconnected. And ultimately, we left working with Chrysler because union was way ahead of the management. They were just dragging behind, almost dragging them into it. So you have to get to the emotional commitment of the people. If you don't have that, you're not going to get everlasting benefit. And the way it comes is, because we're talking about massive change, and you cannot do that without getting people excited about it, without people involved, truly involved. And again, you cannot mandate this culture. You cannot say, here's the memo, tomorrow we're going to have a culture of XYZ. You have to breed it, you have to live it. It has to be a living organism. And no matter how well you do it, there will be 2 steps forward, 1 step backward. So you have to constantly reinforce it. And this becomes the primary goal and primary objective of the leadership team. First and foremost, the leadership must have a compelling vision and set of values that they live by, not just a document, but something that they live by every day. They have to be visibly engaged and involved in all this transformation process, not lead from behind, lead from front. And they have to take pains to make sure that everything that you do, especially the measurements, performance measurements, are totally aligned with the culture you're trying to create. Because if it's not aligned, people will respond to the measurement and not to your desire for certain culture. The next part is your associates. You have to exhibit your own behavior to solicit the right behavior from your associates. And the best way to do that is use the informal networks, not the hierarchical networks. Every company has the informal opinion leaders. Use them extensively to communicate, to learn, to connect with people so that the new culture energy is released, like you see in many of your factories, that people almost seem to walk on air. They're so excited. That you have to do. If you don't do that, your emotional commitment will be not long-lasting. And the last part is, if you have the leadership with clear vision to serve the customers, if you have the people who are excited about what they do, then the customer will feel that in terms of their interaction. Every point of interaction with the customer will become a reinforcing point for customers to say, this company is different. This company is unique because everyone is so much focused on me. And that's where you get more retention. This is where your customers become your advocates, not just loyal to you, but they tell 10 other people, this is what you want to do. And if you don't do this, everything else that we do mechanically will slowly start slipping. So the model for lasting lean transformation, as opposed to one that plateaus, very first thing you must focus on is customers. Make sure you are responding to customers' needs, whether it's for new product, whether it's your current product, whether it is a complaint, whether it is a warranty issue. You respond to them faster than their expectations. And by the way, their expectations are becoming harder and harder. You must be reliable in terms of what you promise, in terms of your delivery, in terms of quality. You must be reliable not only once, time and time and time again. And the value that is perceived by the customer has to be way above the cost they're paying you. And if you do those three things, customers will stay with you and will be not only loyal but advocates for you. Now, how you do that is through your associates. Make sure that they feel, in spite of this implementation where you're doing more with less, if you're focusing on growth, they can see that their job security is not threatened. You must recognize them. You must involve them and empower them in all this important decision that you make, because it's the customers who ultimately delight. It's your employees who ultimately delight your customers. The third subgroup that you're to focus on are your value chain partner, whether it's suppliers or it's distributors or value adders. And the important thing about your suppliers is that you have to almost treat them as an extension of your own capability, so that they become true partners with you, involved early, and they feel that their destiny is tied with your destiny. And really, in business, these are only three levers you have. Delight your customers, excite your employees, and make sure your partners feel real partners. Because the fourth part is, how do you delight your stakeholders, whether they're shareholders or whether they are people who are concerned. And that will happen as a result of focusing on the three levers. rather than the other way around. We don't want you to focus on return and reliability at the expense of the other three. The most important part is you, as a leader, must display and repeat and reinforce distinctive behaviors that matter to both your customers and your employees. And you have to do it every day. It's not something once a year you make a pledge, write a plaque, and do it, and then forget about it. It is something that you have to live day in and day out. Here are some of the examples of those people who have done it. Danaher started this journey in 1987, more than 24 years ago. What you're seeing here is only from 2002 to 2010, during which period, and the important thing to remember is, if you see here, see the revenue, and dividend is directly a reflection of their income, it's twice the rate. So they did not grow at the expense of margin. The margin doubled during this period. They have focus on global operation. Their outside sales are more than half of inside the U.S. The other very important part is, for the last 20 years, they have returned, their return on investments 25% per year, which is better than GE and better than Berkshire Hathaway, and of course, much better than S&P 500. Here's another example. Hubbell, another publicly owned company, started their journey back in 2002, and until then, as you can see, their income was flat, and so was their sales. After they launched the journey, revenues grew almost 2x in 7 years, and income grew 4x. And this, you have to remember that this is something that has been repeated time and time again. When you do it well, your revenue should grow 2 to 3 times faster than the industry growth, and then your income should be at least 2 times the growth of revenue. Because if you're not doing it, you're basically trading dollars. You're not really leveraging your investment. They also freed up $240 million of cash that helped them not only get rid of the debt, but also make a $300 million acquisition and be totally debt-free. They have, since then, Dan and I worked with them almost for 6 years on the steering committee on a quarterly basis, which actually replaced many of their monthly marathon meetings. And I have to repeat this because it was such an enlightening moment for me. I asked Tim Powers, 5 or 6 years into the journey, I said, how has it changed your life? He said, well, before I was going in a month, day after day, one division, second division, third division, operating review, and then month was gone, now we start the next string of them. Since we started this journey, he says, I meet only for 2 days every quarter. Rest of the time I'm free to visit customers or work on strategy. That's what happens. And of course, once you free up and have enforcing results, it's very easy. The other interesting thing they did was they focused on executive development to build bench strength so they can bring acquisitions with strength. So we have people to move in right away and develop the culture they wanted to develop. Here's Pella's example, 17 years. Interesting thing is, Pella was a very small company, about $300 million or so, and today it is peer with some of the industry leaders, and you can see the profitability has grown faster than. And what you see here, which is not shown here, is during this period, not only the market share increase, which, by the way, if you look at the classical management philosophy, they say you cannot grow market share and profitability at the same time. Well, we just didn't know and did it. The other part is that during this period, their inventory turn, which is a measure of freeing up cash, went from 3 to about 14. So all the right things. Customer service remained very high. We are saying at 98, 99, but many years they were way above 99. And they have leveraged lean in just about everything, in starting low stores, in going after, after what you call replacement window sales when the new home market was going down. And they have used this philosophy in just about everything, including acquisitions. Here is an international example from Alexander Wiegand's company. And again, you can see the sales are up in 10 years, 2x, but the profitability is 4x. And I think the real focus on TWC started sometime in 2005, Alexandra. And since then, you can see, you do get some benefit without focusing on cash flow. But once you start focusing on TWC, trade working capital, you can see the trend is going down. And we were talking in Germany a couple of weeks ago, and I said, I would love to see a headline one of these days, and I'm sure it's going to happen, that WIKA goes from 9 million profit to 90 million profit in 10 years, right? I'm waiting for that. What are the financial reasons for overcoming? Of course, you can do all the other things, but to summarize that, revenue growth or market share growth. If you look at the 3 to 5 year horizon, give me some sense. What do you think a generic growth should be? 1.5x, 2x? It also depends on the industry that you're in. If I'm saying the same thing in China, then they'll say 1.5x in 5 years is 1 year target, not 5 year target. So you get more business. And if you do it right, that means if you do more with less, if you leverage not only manufacturing footprint, but you also leverage your administrative footprint, you leverage your heritage in terms of customer intimacy to launch new products that will take the pressure of decommoditization. Commoditization goes away. That means you can sustain higher prices. Then you'll be able to make more money. And typically, as I was saying, it should be twice the rate of the growth of sales. And the last part is more cash. More cash for investment in new products, more cash for acquisition. So organic or non-organic growth will come from that. So I thought to close this session, I will give you a composite. And the reason I say composite is because I've taken the results of many companies we work with, some who want to share and some who don't want to share. And I created a conservative, generic example, what can happen to your financial picture if you do this right. So this hypothetical company is $1 billion in sales. Their EBIT is about 7%, $70 million. And they're carrying inventory of about $200 million, which, if you follow the normal things, about 3 turns. And their fixed capital is about $200 million, which is about 20% of the inventory. So if this was a company, and if I were to ask you in 2 to 3 years, and this is, let's use the context of U.S. companies where the GDP is maybe 2 to 3%, what do you think their growth in sales could be in 24 to 36 months? Anyone? Pardon me? 1.5 times? It is quite possible. I chose a very conservative point of 15%. That's possible, right? Most companies probably exceed it. So if you did that, and you focused on doing more with less and trying to leverage not only your manufacturing footprint, but in all the functions, what do you think will happen to the margin, EBIT margin, or EBIT percentage? How much more can you get in 24 to 36 months? Pardon me? 30%. Okay. Anyone else? How much EBIT can you expect? I took, again, a very conservative view. You go from 7% to 8%. You just add 1% in 3 years. Our experience has been 1 to half of 1% per year during this period. So taking a very conservative approach is 31%, which again supports that this 15% growth is giving you 30% margin. Inventory. How do you think, how much can you go down from 3 turns? Or in terms of turns, how much up can you be in 24 to 36 months? 5 turns? I happen to use that, 5 turns. And 5 turns mean with the growth, you will still need about 138 million. And can we reduce the fixed capital during this period? In case of Hubbell, in the first 4 years, we took out 1.5 million square foot of real estate that they didn't need anymore, in addition to taking the inventory. Yeah, exactly. And I took a very conservative approach that you reduce the fixed investment by 10%. So what happens if you do this to your return on invested capital? It really, really starts to look good. Let's take one step further and look at that company was borrowing some debt. Let's say they started with $100 million. And since you generate money not only in income, but you freed up cash. And you pay part of it to retire about $60 million of debt, which is quite possible, right? So what happens to the value of the company? And I use very simple multiples here. Multiple of earnings minus the debt to 665. And I again took a composite of multiple that we had. And if you go to this side, that gives you almost 40% increase in the wealth or the valuation of the company. You have to lead with personal involvement. It is not something that you write memos about. You have to be in front, leading from the front. And the other very important thing is your activity doesn't equal result. Yes, in the beginning you may focus on it, but very quickly you have to get off that and have very critical few metrics that are meaningful and that give you the pulse of the organization, and have a culture that is embedded with root cause analysis, countermeasures, so that you get back on track, because Mr. Murphy will show up no matter what. And deep emotional commitment at all levels, not just at the top. You have to filter it down to each and every employee of the company. And if you do that, wealth creation will follow if you focus on 3 things: your customers, your employees, and your partners. Thank you very much.